Hey everyone, and welcome to the third episode of the Sleeklens Podcast. So excited to be back with another one. This one's going to be a fun one because this one centers around smartphone photography tips. Now, as we know, smartphone photography is kind of a big deal these days. It seems like a lot of people are kind of ditching their big cameras and just carrying around smartphones. I actually just answered a question a little bit ago to a user who said, who wanted to know the best smartphone editing app so she can leave her camera behind and just take her iPhone with her and take photos using her iPhone and edit them on the go with an iPhone editing app. And so it seems like that's happening more and more these days. Obviously, DSLRs and high quality cameras are much needed. But it's becoming a big thing where people want to travel light, so they want to make sure they carry a small camera with them, and that's usually their phone because their phone's with them most of the time anyway. And so these tips are going to be just some simple things that you can do to try to get some different and more creative photos, but also just make your photos generally better overall. But these tips are going to basically be concentrating on features that are found in the iPhone, because that's usually what I'm familiar with. I am an iDevice user, and so I have an iPhone, and that's kind of what I know best. But again, a lot of these features can be transitioned over to an Android device or any kind of other smartphone that you might have. A lot of these features are found in those smartphones as well. So even if you hear me talking about an iPhone, look and make sure that your smartphone has these features, because most likely they do. So some of these tips are going to be very, very simple, but some are also going to be some things that you might not have noticed. But the first tip we're going to talk about is composition. This is really a simple thing that a lot of people kind of forget, but you can easily almost instantly improve your photography without changing any settings by just working on your composition. So one of the main composition rules that are out there is called the rule of thirds. That's basically splitting your frame into two lines going vertical and two lines going horizontal, and it's basically cutting your image up into 9 squares. And so what that does basically is give you points of interest to put a subject on. So when you look at the intersecting lines, maybe you would put your subject in the bottom left corner, and that will kind of create a rule of thirds that'll give a lot of negative space on the right side. The iPhone has a feature that allows you to enable a grid on your phone, so you get an automatic rule of thirds, and you can kind of play with it that way. Obviously, the lines do not show up in your final image, but while you're looking on the camera, you'll be able to see the grid and kind of help you position items that way. But the rule of thirds is obviously one of the most widely known rules when it comes to composition. There are other rules out there, kind of like leading lines. That's a big one. Having a leading line, maybe a path, a walking path going up to a subject, that can create instant interest in your photo, having that leading line there. You can even use symmetry, making sure everything is perfectly symmetrical from left to right. It basically would look like a mirror image of each other if you just flipped it in half. You would have a lot of symmetry there. So just a basic rule of thirds, a basic composition strategy will definitely improve your photography without changing any settings whatsoever. Next, this kind of goes along with the composition. We're going to talk about using angles. The beauty of being able to use a small phone, a small camera like an iPhone or an Android or any kind of other smartphone, is that you can kind of get in different places that you might not be able to using a big DSLR. So one of the most popular kind of angles to get is kind of that low angle looking up at a subject, and what it kind of creates is a more dominant image, a more impactful image. And so with a smartphone, you're easily able to bend down low and position that camera very low and still see that very large screen. It's much larger than a LCD screen on the back of a DSLR, so you'll still be able to see your image. And again, just because the phone is so small, you're able to get down low and not have any trouble kind of positioning it, and you can get in really different places. If you go on the opposite side of going down low, you can actually hold it above your head much easier and kind of fire a burst mode of shots. If you're trying to capture a crowd at a concert or something, you can just kind of hold down the shutter button and get a burst source mode of shots and kind of select the best photo from that. And it's going to look a little bit less obtrusive if you're holding a small iPhone up in the air opposed to a big DSLR camera. Next is using exposure lock to control the lighting on your native camera app. So on the iPhone, they all have a camera app. It's usually called Camera, and you click on the camera app, and that's kind of your native camera app, your built-in camera app on the phone. And so what exposure lock does is maybe you're shooting into a bright window, and so your subject is going to be completely dark because it's exposing, the whole image is exposing for that bright window. So a way to kind of correct that is, number one, you can kind of move out of the way and try to find a different composition that's not pointing directly at the window. Or you can use exposure lock. And how you do that exactly is you click and hold on your screen, you click and hold on your subject, and the camera will kind of lock itself in that different mode, that focus exposure lock. So it won't move the exposure unless you basically tell it to. And when you're locked in there, you can actually scroll up on the screen or scroll down. And as you scroll up, it'll brighten the image, and if you scroll down, it'll kind of darken the image. So you can kind of play with more lighting effects. You're basically upping the exposure or darkening the exposure depending on what you want, and not allowing the camera to do kind of any evaluative metering when it comes to finding the right exposure for the photo. This feature also works well in using video as well. So if you're doing a video on your phone, any kind of video mode, a 1080p, a 4K, it doesn't matter. That feature usually works there as well. So if you find that some of your videos might be a little dark, you can also use that exposure lock and focus lock as a really great way to kind of enhance the exposure a little bit without having the camera do all the work. So now that we talked a little bit about the native built-in camera app on your phone, let's say you're just fed up with it. You don't want to use the native built-in app just because there's not a lot of features there. Sure, it allows for editing inside that app and all that kind of fun stuff, but you actually want to use something different. I encourage you to look at some different apps that I'm going to talk about some in just a second, but one of the main apps that I like to use are apps that allow you to control almost all of the image, all of the settings as you would a DSLR camera. One of my favorite apps to use is actually called ProCam, PROCAM, ProCam. It's a great app. It does both video and regular stills, and you're allowed to change the ISO, the aperture, the exposure. You're actually even able to change the ratio of the image. There's tons of stuff that you can change in that camera app, and it's a really great app. You can actually even put it as a shortcut widget on your phone, so that way instead of instinctively going to the native camera app, you open that up and you're able to take photos. That app also allows you to edit inside the app, the DNG files, the digital negative files. So basically, you're editing the raw file that you just took. That's a really great feature as well. You can also export it and eventually update it in some other kind of program like Lightroom. You can actually export it onto your desktop and edit that photo in Lightroom and get some better results as you would you just using a JPEG. So that's one of my favorite apps to use. I pretty much use that app opposed to using the native built-in camera app. So this next tip is kind of like a fun one. Let's say you're out in some sort of really bright sunny situation. Maybe you're on a beach somewhere and you're trying to take photos of family, and you just notice that the sky is just really blown out. It doesn't look like an appealing photo. So what you could actually do is most of the time we all have them sunglasses. You can take your sunglasses and put them over the camera lens to kind of help darken the exposure and try to get you a little bit balance of exposure. This works normally best when you have polarizing sunglasses. We all know what polarizing filters do for regular DSLRs, and polarizing lenses for sunglasses basically do the same exact thing. It darkens up a certain part of the image while leaving the bottom of the image kind of a little bit brighter, and it allows for more neutral exposure. It also cuts down reflections as well. So polarizing sunglasses can actually help with taking some images like that. I've actually used this technique a lot, especially if I'm in a really bright situation. I just just want a really cool photo. So I'll take my sunglasses off and put my sunglasses over the camera lens and take photos that way. And it turns out really, really great. So that's a really quick and easy way to get really fancy looking shots with sunglasses. Next is try to use natural light. Natural light is a big key when it comes to getting really great, well lit, well exposed, and creative images. A lot of people actually stick to using flash, the little dot of light that comes out of your smartphone. It's not that powerful of a flash. I don't care how much technology they put in the flash. I don't care how many different tones and color tones they can put into the flash. It's not that powerful, and it definitely doesn't hold up to having natural light in your image. One thing that always gripes me when I'm seeing people taking photos, especially maybe at sporting events, you see all these little flash bulbs pop off. That can be a lot of different things. A lot of people have DSLRs with their pop-up flash doing the same thing. But the little flashes will usually be little, iPhone or smartphone flashes. And what people don't understand is, they just think they need the flash to have more light in the photo. But what they're actually doing is, damaging the photo in a way, because they're just ruining the exposure basically, because that flash can only travel so far. That little tiny dot can't go, from, 15 rows back in a concert to all the way upstage. It can't transfer that far up to that point of where they think it's going to go. It maybe can go 2 feet in front of them or somewhere around there. So if they were to just take the flash off and try to get a very natural look exposure, they're probably going to come out with a better looking photo. Sure, it might have a little bit more noise in it, and you might see a little bit of movement depending on the lighting situation, but still the overall photo will probably be a lot better than using a little tiny flash. Next is kind of like another little workaround, and that's using the panorama mode on your smartphone to kind of get a mimic of a wide angle lens. And so we've kind of been in this situation where maybe we're taking a group photo of somebody, of some group out there, and we just can't get back far enough to capture everybody in the frame. So we have to kind of shuffle people in and, tell them to scooch closer together, and some people move in front just to try to shrink it up a little bit. But what you can actually do is use the panorama feature on your phone to do a makeshift wide angle lens. And so, from using the panorama, you're going to have to go from 180 degrees from left to right. So, we know that we don't have to get all 180 degrees, so we can kind of just move slowly, from far left, pan over our group and get the whole group in the shot, and then kind of pan away from the right. And then we can just crop in later on in the editing and get a kind of a makeshift wide angle lens and also get everybody in the photo. So that's just a really quick thing. I've actually used this a lot because I typically shoot real estate, and sometimes I want to capture a quick photo on my phone to share on Instagram of maybe a room that I'm shooting. And I know I can't get wide enough with my iPhone because the lens on the iPhone is not really that wide. So I want to make sure I get as much of the room as possible. So I'll shoot a panorama, crop in, and then post it to social. Next is another little trick that not a lot of people know of, and it's actually been around for a very, very long time, but it's actually using your headphones as a shutter release cable. So what you can do is plug your headphones into your camera and set your camera pretty far away from you, and on the headphones you have the little volume up and volume down rocker, and you can actually use that as a shutter release. So maybe you want to take a selfie and you don't have anybody help you with the taking of the photo or anything like that. You can actually plug your headphones in there, kind of back away from the camera a little bit, and do a little bit of selfie action with that shutter release. Some wireless headphones as well actually allow you to do this. It just depends on the wireless headphone maker and the model. But a lot of wireless headphones will actually do the same thing because they all have the volume up and volume down button. And you can actually do that with a small headphone, because so it almost act like a wireless shutter release, which is actually kind of cool. So lastly, we're going to talk about editing when it comes to smartphone photography. I really don't like to edit on the smartphone if I don't have to. If I'm running and gunning and I'm just running around trying to get some cool photos, I might edit a little bit on the phone and just be done with it. But if I can save it till later and edit in my regular Lightroom on my desktop, I will try to do that as well. But there are a couple really good photography apps that allow you to do really good editing. The first one that I use, or the first one that I've been using a long time, is actually called Snapseed. A lot of people actually use that one. It's made by Google, or Google owns it, and it's a really great app. They update it regularly, which is really great. And they have tons of kind of pro level features. They have transform, they have blurring, they have color adjustments, they have blemish removal. They have all these really cool features and functions that allow you to really take control of your photo. I actually know a lot of people that will take photos on their iPhone, transfer them to their iPad, and use their iPad as their main editing source using Snapseed. So it's a really great option if you're really not wanting to get into one of those people that sits down in front of a computer and just edits their photos. This is a really good option for you. Another app that has also been out for a little bit, and I also check back to see how many cool filters and features they have added, is VSCO. I really like that app. They have a lot of really great filters that you can play with. You can also do some fine-tune editing, but the filters are really what makes that app very popular. You can do all kinds of stuff when it comes to using those filters. They have filters that you can purchase. They also come with free filters as well. So I really recommend you checking that out. You can also export your photos directly to any social media network from that app, so it makes for a really convenient source for editing your photos. Next is kind of like an obvious one. It's actually Instagram. A lot of people actually think that when you edit a photo on Instagram, you actually have to post it, but you really don't. What happens is when you open a photo in Instagram and you start editing, and you click the next button after you've done editing, that photo should actually save directly to your phone before you kind of post it on social media. So you can actually cancel out of all of that after you've edited your photo, and now you have a photo that was edited in Instagram but never post. So actually Instagram has some really great features as well. They don't have a lot of filters as far as VSCO does, and the filters they do have are kind of the well-known filters that when we see it, we know that was probably taken using Instagram. So I kind of stay away from filters as much as I can, but the actual fine-tuned edits that you can do in Instagram are really great. They have a lot of really well-known features that maybe a Lightroom would have, a really popular editing suite would have. So you can actually edit photos in that suite without actually posting, which is a really great feature as well. Next, you can actually use Lightroom, but you can use what's called Lightroom Mobile. Lightroom Mobile is a mobile version of Lightroom, and you can actually edit your files taken on your phone from Lightroom Mobile. And the great thing about that is it has most of the same features that regular Lightroom would have. They're obviously laid out a little bit different to suit the small screen of the phone. But they're laid out a little bit different, and what's really great about that is once you're editing the photo, if you have your Lightroom synced up on your main computer, synced up with Lightroom on your phone, those files will actually instantly transfer back and forth. So you can edit the file on your phone, and maybe you got interrupted and you can't get back to it. You can actually get back on your computer and finish editing that photo. So that's one real great feature, is having the syncability between your phone and your computer. And lastly, like I said, is probably one of the better options if you're trying to get really great photos, is actually exporting the photo as a digital negative file, a DNG file, and editing it in Lightroom on your desktop. You're going to be able to get more of the image. You're going to be able to see more of the image. You're going to have a little bit more features that you're used to. So you're probably going to get better known adjustments that you're kind of used to putting on the photos. You can also play with presets that you've downloaded or bought. So it's a really well-known place to edit your photos. So if you have the time, transfer your photos to your Lightroom catalog as a DNG and edit them that way. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed some of those quick smartphone photography tips. Now let's roll into the featured item of the week. So the featured item of the week this week is not really an actual item. I should probably clarify that. It's actually a really cool technique for getting really fast edited photos if you're in a hurry. And so a lot of people don't know that there's a feature in Adobe Lightroom called Import Preset. This feature is actually found in the Import module, and it's a section on the right-hand side called Apply During Import. And there's a little box right under that says Develop Settings. And in that Develop Settings pull-down menu, you're going to see all of your well-known presets that you have installed on your Lightroom catalog. So any preset that you have installed in your develop module, you will see in that develop settings panel. And so if there's a popular preset that you always apply to every photo, or there's a popular setting that you always apply to every photo, why not have Lightroom do it for you when it's importing, so it saves you time later? And so there's a couple presets that I always apply to particular photos. And what I'll do is when I import the photo, I'll change the develop settings to that preset, and I'll let Lightroom do that all at once while it's importing. When I get back to my computer, I can see that all the presets are applied to all of the images, and now I can just do some fine-tuning adjustments and send them on their way after they're done. So again, it just makes for a really, really fast editing session, and it's a really popular feature that not a lot of people know about. All right, guys, that is episode 3 in the books. I hope you got some really cool smartphone photography tips out of this, and I want you to try that import preset section. It's a really great feature for getting really quick edits. But again, like with every episode, make sure you use the coupon code Sleeklens Podcast to get 10% off anything found on sleeklens.com. It'll take 10% off your entire cart, and that'll just let us show you a little bit of appreciation for listening to the podcast. So thank you for joining me in this podcast. My name is Jordan Yance, and I'll see you in the next podcast.